Russia's democratic collapse must rank as one of the most significant setbacks among the third and fourth waves of democratization. Structure and agency are necessary for a complete account of how Russia went from autocracy to democracy and back again, but the agency is more likely. Russia was structurally compelled to manage democratic and market reforms while overseeing the fall of the Soviet Union. In today's video, we will look deeply into why Russia cannot become a democracy. Let's dive right in. The Soviet Union's regime change was initiated by Mikhail Gorbachev rather than weakened state institutions or a collapsing command economy, suggesting that the agency of individual actors may have had a more significant impact. Following Gorbachev, Boris Yeltsin made choices that jeopardized the consolidation of democracy and, in some ways, set the stage for the eventual restoration of autocracy. Vladimir Putin, the most prominent of these, is named Yeltsin's successor. While historical legacies, unalterable cultural norms, or immovable institutions may have molded Russians, they do not imprison them indefinitely. Some Russians may have made decisions that led to autocracy in the past, but others may do so in the future. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia has brought Kiev closer to Europe, the West, and democracy. But which course will Russia take? Is there still hope for it to transition from a growingly rigid dictatorship to a democracy? Western nations, notably Switzerland, had tremendous and probably foolish hopes that Russia would start a regulated democratization process when Dmitry Medvedev was president of Russia from May 2008 to May 2012. They expected Russia to move toward democracy and held to Medvedev's maxim, "Being free is better than not being free." But it was evident that those expectations were misplaced when demonstrations broke out in Moscow's Bolotnaya Square the day before Vladimir Putin's third inauguration as president in 2012. After gaining the presidency, Putin made various moves to strengthen the autocracy of the government. These included the assassination attempt on Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, the gradual dismantling of what local self-government structures remained, the complete censorship of the media, the repression of so-called system liberals in the government, and finally, the aggression against Ukraine. The 2020 constitutional amendment allowed him to disregard term limits and continue in office beyond 2024. In hindsight, it is clear that these weren't merely random occurrences. Instead, Russia was actively preparing for the conflict it is currently engaged in. Russia is the only remaining authoritarian great power in Europe. In December 1991, it appeared for a brief period that Boris Yeltsin, the first president of the Russian Federation, would keep his promise to enact a popularly sovereign democracy. But he did not. Instead, he overthrew the parliament in 1993 and imposed an authoritarian constitution on the country. And he hasn't looked back since. To advance his old master's covert authoritarian goal, Vladimir Putin, Yeltsin's successor as president and former head of the secret police, systematically suppressed voting rights, political participation, and legislative independence. Even though current oppression isn't as severe as it was during the terrible Brezhnev era, it is moving toward an autocrat where the king rules without interference from a political party. On 31 December 1999, the ailing Yeltsin resigned and named Putin acting president, triggering the election to be moved forward to March 2000, which benefited the acting president's electoral prospects. The Second Chechen War, which began in the middle of 1999 and gained popularity after Chechen terrorists purportedly assaulted multiple civilian sites in September, also helped Putin's campaign for president. With all of these factors working in his favor, Putin easily won the election in 2000. Russia's precarious political structure still complied with the essential requirements of an elected democracy at that time. Yeltsin made choices that jeopardized the consolidation of democracy and, in some ways, set the stage for the eventual restoration of autocracy. It was a mistake for him to dissolve the Russian Congress by decree. Weeks later, he was forced to employ force against elected officials. Additionally, it gave rise to a super-presidential constitution, which Putin has successfully used to undermine democracy. Democracy might have endured after Yeltsin had Russia converted to parliamentary democracy in 1993, either by not dissolving the Russian Congress or ratifying a new constitution. At the height of his popularity and the nation's support for democracy in 1991, Yeltsin could have garnered more backing for his government's difficult reforms had he called for new elections. The so-called loans for shares scheme was Yeltsin's second significant error. Yeltsin and his administration accepted financial support, loans in exchange for stakes in lucrative businesses from Russia's wealthiest oligarchs to raise money for his 1996 re-election campaign. Some members of Yeltsin's team saw this tactic as a safeguard against a communist victory because if Zyuganov triumphed, he would not be able to govern these already privatized companies. The billionaires had every motive to support Yeltsin's campaign because they feared a communist restoration. Hence, the plot was unnecessary. By enhancing their wealth through this insider plan, Yeltsin eroded support for democracy more broadly, damaged the reputation of market reform as a whole, and cast doubt on the validity of privatization, which many Russians associated with corruption. Yeltsin's failure to dismantle the KGB was the third mistake. Although it was divided into external and internal intelligence branches, more significant reforms were never implemented. Yeltsin gave Putin, a former KGB officer himself, a potent instrument for re-establishing tyranny after 2000 by effectively maintaining this key institution of Soviet-era repression. The most significant decision made by Yeltsin was to name Putin as his successor. At the time, neither Putin's political nor economic views nor his style of government enjoyed a groundswell of popular support. Polls conducted in August 1999 revealed that a tiny percentage of Russians were aware of him. Although Yeltsin had alternative options, he chose Putin, or at least agreed to the choice, because his inner circle believed Putin could win and would not append the status quo. By this point, Yeltsin was reportedly neither physically nor psychologically capable of making judgments. During these formative years, Russian democracy suffered a severe decline. The political system was viewed as a dictatorship by the majority of academics, albeit with softer qualifiers like electoral, competitive, unconsolidated, or hybrid. Putin did not entirely crush all political opposition or weaken all democratic institutions during the 2000s, though. Instead, he instituted what his advisors later referred to as sovereign democracy or managed democracy. Because Putin was electable, this dictatorship permitted some pockets of pluralism. However, he did not create all or even most of the origins of his fame. Growth had finally been sparked by the difficult partial market reforms of the 1990s, which were prolonged for several years by the sharply rising world oil and gas prices, a matter over which Putin had little control. Putin's popularity was boosted by structural economic issues, remarkably, the price of energy globally. The popularity of Nemtsov or any other Russian politician who was in the right place at the right moment in 2000 would have received the same treatment. New democracies must perform to consolidate, particularly in terms of financial results. The strong presidential constitution and the unreformed intelligence services that Putin inherited from Yeltsin's decisions were additional tools for his rollback of democracy. Democracies can be made or broken by individuals, socio-economic forces, and historical institutional path dependence. Putin's authoritarianism probably would not have persisted if the Russian economy had gone through another 10 years of stagnation in the 2000s. On the other hand, if Yeltsin had chosen Nemtsov, democracy most likely would have grown stronger as the economy expanded. Globally, democracy has been deteriorating for more than 15 years. The increasing cruelty of authoritarian leaders, especially Russian President Vladimir Putin, is a significant contributing factor. I'll explain how Russia's invasion of Ukraine fits within the broader geopolitical tendencies of the previous 15 years. Putin has consolidated power, rebuilt Russia's military, and weakened his adversaries for over 2 decades. He has consistently put down democratic movements and uprisings by the people, including those in Belarus and Syria. He interfered with elections in the West. Additionally, he has sent Russian forces to impose his will, including in Crimea and Georgia. Around the world, democracy is eroding, and Vladimir Putin is a significant contributor. In light of this, whether the degradation of democracy worldwide will continue unchecked is part of a big picture, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Do you see Russia becoming a democracy after Putin leaves? Make sure to let us know your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel as a sacrifice to the gods of the algorithm. Thanks for watching.